And people ask me all the time, how do I find my calling? I tell them, let's go back and let's identify, what you've been through that was meant to kill you, but it didn't. And then people say to me, well, I didn't have anything traumatic. I had a good upbringing. Well, first of all, if you had a good upbringing and saw good love, it is your moral responsibility to go teach good love to other people. If you saw good love and you got a friend over here and he's not treating his lady right and he's talking to her like crap, you've got to be the one. And they may not like it in the moment. They may not think it's cool in the moment. They may ridicule you, but I'm telling you, I promise you, you're planting a seed.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Low Bottom High Rise podcast with me, Moira Casaba, your host, and you are in for a treat today. I have Miss Rachel Baribeau on the show, and I am so excited. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm so pumped. We were talking about it in the pre-show meeting, that we're cut from the same cloth, that there's people that know us both, that tell us that we are very similar. And I've watched you, I've seen you, and I know what you stand for. So I'm just so honored to be with you.
I feel the exact same way. I always say, listen to the whispers, right? And the whispers can be your friends, your acquaintances saying, you guys have to connect. You need to know each other. And I'm like, absolutely, let's do it. So I used to always on the show, give everybody kind of the backstory and who you are and what you do. And just recently I've thought, I definitely want you to give the accolades, right? The titles and all of that. But I really want to ask you, like, who is Rachel Baribeau? How would you define that societally, right? And just as a soul?
Yeah. So that's such a good question. And when I say that means you really got it, because I spent 17 years in the media and being on your side. Well, first, I'm a child of God. I am unhealed, but healing. Yes. I'm searching, I'm seeking, I'm a queen. I know my value. I know my worth. I know my dark spots and places that I want to work on. There's no grass growing up underneath my feet, sister. I am, there are most days I would tell you that I feel like there's not enough hours and days and years in this life to meet the people I want to meet and go where I want to go and eat what I want to eat and travel and do and learn the languages. And, I'm just a lover of people and life. And I've had some extreme, beautiful highs, and people have seen me at the top and they've also seen me at the bottom. I, as I mentioned, I spent 17 years in sports media. I became the first female host on SiriusXM on their collegiate channels. I vote for the Heisman, one of the only few females in the world to do that, of 800 people. And then there's only just a handful of females inside of that 800. And then almost 7 years ago, August 26th, this month, I started a movement called I'm Changing the Narrative. And it happened to start in athletics, but now it's spread out to churches, high schools, corporations, prisons, halfway houses, literally anywhere where they'll have me. And I say, if it's age 6 to 96, if you're still breathing, there's still time. And I travel and speak on good love for yourself and others, interpersonal relationships, purpose beyond your job or athletics, joy, and how to have true self-love. And then most recently, I just wrote a book called Relentless Joy. So I'm not busy at all.
Oh my God, you are my people. Like, you are my people. I mean, every single word you just spoke, I'm like, yes. I'm trying to not interject because I don't want to mess up the audio.
Interject. You can interject. I'm an interjector. You can totally interject.
But this is everything. I mean, it's everything. And I really want to dig into the story behind this, right?
Yeah.
What there's always a story, right? And I love, even when I was younger, I remember saying when I was 16 years old, I think I feel my highs more than most people, but I feel my lows more than most people. And then I didn't understand that I was also going to experience that, right? I was going to experience some of the most beautiful highs that very few people do, but often you don't get to the top of the mountain without being in the depths of hell, because it builds grit, it builds perseverance, it builds character, it builds a different narrative, right? My story behind what is hard is radically different from other people because I really know hard.
Yeah.
So take me all the way back. Like, how did this begin? First of all, I just think it's so badass that you're like the first female. I mean, I'm a sports fanatic. My family, I grew up in a sports fanatical family. My kids are both like involved at high levels, and I feel really called too. It's so interesting where God takes you. I'm like, oh, a lot of what I'm doing in the world is going in this direction. I just see
Yeah.
that in my future because I'm so passionate about it and there's such a need. But where did this all begin for you?
Well, first, I just want to say this: anybody that I can connect you with in my world, in the sports world, and for your kids, for you, that was my world for 17 years. And so, for me, I believe I said it in my book, and for me, relationships are everything. They're my currency. Therefore, I'm a
Absolutely.
billionaire.
I just got goosebumps, girl. I just got goosebumps. I believe it. Yeah.
And it's some people they're about success, they're about this, they're about money, they're about, and I travel the globe and I teach people, look, it's human beings, it's interactions, it's relationships. That is the good lasting stuff of life. You're not going to lay on your deathbed and wish you had more money. You're not going to lay on your deathbed and wish you had more success. You're going to wish you had more just glimmering moments and memories with your children, with your friends, with your family, with people that you love. And you said something a moment ago that struck me, how when you were little, you felt the highs probably higher than some people in the lows too. I recently came across this post and it just struck me. And that's what happens as a speaker. Something will strike me and I will put it in a file, and then I will go study it and speak on it and write about it, all of those things. And I teach other speakers that too. And so this post said it was about having a child that cried at the sunsets, that they were so beautiful. And the mother was basically saying that instead of, saying, no, that's not, why are you crying? She taught this child that you ready for this? Their sensitivity was a superpower.
Oh, yes.
And it wasn't my mama, it wasn't my daddy, it was society. If I had known that earlier on in my life, my gracious, I could have harnessed this power that I have now so much earlier. And I now want to teach parents that, and teach people that, and teach kids that, and teach 80-year-olds that, that your sensitivity, you're not too emotional. You're not too this, or too weepy, or too whatever. No, your sensitivity is a superpower.
Wow. That is, and whether it's sensitivity or something else, right? It's a gift. It's a gift. And I think about that with my son because he can be very shy. And I'm like, but that's how God created him. Like, let's embrace that and celebrate that instead of what we do as society, as parents in our society. Like, you got to be more confident. You got to speak up. You got to. And it's just, it's a shaming tone and message that we have to be so careful to not give them this identity and shame of their God-given personality,
Let me tell you something about that. I recently spoke at a school and it did wonders for my self-confidence. This is so funny. I spoke at the school and the school was like, are you sure? Are you okay? There's like 800 kids there. They're all in the gym. I said, I've spoken to a lot of people before. And I think I'm from the South. So I say they weren't hungry. They were hungry, for like a message. And I started the message just like I would tell your child. If you're an introvert, you be the most fantastic introvert that you have ever seen, and you study you, and you, whatever it is that you love doing by yourself. Solitude is a gift. Most people cannot be alone. They feel like they're lonely, and that's a difference. Solitude is a gift. And so I encouraged them and I said, and if you're an extrovert, be your wonderful, amazing extra self. You would have thought, Moira, that I was Taylor Swift. Every time I pause, they scream. I pause.
Oh, I love it.
But they needed to hear it. And it's so true for your child, whoever you are, your sensitivity, your shyness, your introvertedness, your extrovertedness. I spent half my life, again, being told I was too much. And I tried to tone myself down. I even had an agent once to tell me to be less colorful, less Latina, and wear more beige and kind of tone.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is the underlying message, right? It's like whoever you are born to be, whoever you are born in this world as, when you can just be in that and be authentically who you are. It sounds so canned, but like it really is it aligns, you step into freedom, right? In your identity, you step into relationship with the right people, because when we're trying to be something we're not, we're going to parties, hanging out with people we don't want to hang out with because we're trying to be something, And it's
Exactly.
like, be who you are. And this is a silly little story, but I remember back in my 20s when everybody's trying to be something they're not. One of my girlfriends was going out with a bunch of friends and she's like, it's my birthday, come. And, I'm sober and I'm like, "Ugh, it's not my scene. It's
Yeah.
like not my scene. And I'm feeling like less than, the shame around being a recovering alcoholic. But what I was really feeling was just me. Sober or not my scene, right? Like that's
Not
not
your
fun for
people.
me.
Not your
And I'm
people.
like feeling just this heaviness, this cloak of like, God, I should go, but I don't want to go. And it's going to be miserable and I'm going to be uncomfortable. And then I said something. I said, well, is Ashley going? Another friend of ours. And she goes, oh God, no. God, no, Ashley would never come to my birthday dinner out downtown with a bunch of people, on the scene.
Yeah.
And I thought, wait, you still love Ashley.
Yeah.
Ashley's no different in your life. I need to stand in who I am and be more like Ashley.
Yes.
She,
Yes.
it doesn't mean it has to destroy friendships. You really align with your people when you step into your authenticity.
And one tiny little story back that I think, and I just love this flow, by the way.
Yeah.
She's going to speak on it. If you see it, you say it, it's beautiful and it's lovely, speak it. But I teach on this story too. When I was back, I lived in Nashville before I live in Florida now. I got married and have 4 bonus kids, but I lived in Nashville. And I remember I went to a series of meetings. And this first meeting I went to, this was at the beginning of I'm Changing the Narrative. I sat down a newspaper where there had been a number of football players that were accused of sexual assault and found guilty at Vanderbilt. And I said, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, but I'm changing the narrative. And I remember the man, his eyes kind of got wide and he was like, you probably need to focus on one thing and then do the other. And I said, no. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so fast forward a couple of weeks and another woman asked to meet with me. And I, again, told her about all the plans and everything with I'm Changing the Narrative. Same response. And it was eyes wide, like there is a lot to this girl. She's trying to do a lot. And I don't blame either one of those people. Here is the lesson. It was a lesson in your story. Those just weren't my people.
Right.
They did not have the capacity to get my large vision and personality. And not everybody is either ready at a place in their life or healed enough or in a state of healing to be able to get your vision, or they just might not simply be your people.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the messages you teach. I teach the same message. Look for your people. And, to those kids, I told them, stop trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. If it doesn't fit, stop trying to force it and be you.
Be you. I saw Eddie Pinero posted something today that said, no one's going to call you and tell you how great your idea is. You need to see the finish line before it's actually there.
Yes.
And then I'm going to share this one quick experience and then I want you to run with the story because I'm so anxious to hear. But I can remember being at an event surrounded by my people. I had been speaking at the event. I was just on fire. I've tons of people coming up to me, talking to me, just, you crying to me about how my message impacted them. Came home, went to a party and I'm just in the zone. Right. So I'm still bubbling over with stuff. And I look around the circle and everyone's glazed over and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? They were so unimpressed. And it's not about being impressive to people, but I was like, oh, that's not my people. They're not even on the same wavelength getting anything about what I'm saying. But those are such God-given gifts, those little moments where you're like, oh, I need to pivot a little bit here, or I need to not spend more time here. I need to spend less time in these circles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen. Oh, so good. Okay. So go back to the story.
Yeah. Which one?
Well, so you're 17 years. You said 17 years in sportscasting, right?
Yeah. 17 years.
So, and how long ago did that wrap up?
Yeah, so it wrapped up a few years ago. And so I was still sportscasting a couple of years back, take you back to 2016. I saw a problem in college athletics, and it was a really dark summer for sports fans. If you are not a sports fan, that here's what happened. Basically, we were on the heels of a nasty sexual scandal at Penn State. We were in the thick of a scandal at Baylor. there was summer 2016, there was domestic violence, sexual violence, guys getting in trouble, coaches getting in trouble all over the country.
Yes.
And I had newly moved to Nashville. I was downtown broadcasting in that Batman building, you know, on top of the world. And I remember just thinking, like, during the breaks, Moira, I would cry. I was like, what is going on with this sport that I've given my life to?
Yeah.
What, like, all the news was negative, because as a female in the industry, I would prep for a show 2 hours early. You know, I had to have, you had to be twice as, you know, prepared to be respected half as much.
Yes.
And so I'd prep, and it was all negative news. And I believed God made me a do something girl. And I was like, what if I went in and I talked to them about taking the headlines back for something good? I also, and this is a huge thing on what I teach, I learned myself, use your pain for purpose, because many moons ago, I had been drug across the house by my hair by somebody who claimed to love me. And all of this domestic violence in college football brought up that memory that I thought I was done with, that I thought I was healed from. And I said, what if I go in and teach football players and bring them into that night, tell the story, and bring them into that night and say, if you were there, because there were other males in the house that night, no one came to help me. It was pathetic. It was disgusting. And I said to these players, if you were there that night, would you have helped me? Moira, they screamed, they cried, they jump up, they cheered, they hug me afterwards. They say, I've been there. I protected my mama. I will never let a woman, I'll never let this happen to a woman. And so that's how it started. Purpose, passion, platform, my own experience of domestic violence. And then somewhere along, I thought I'd always be a sportscaster. I thought I'd just be doing these talks on the side. Well, then it got so big and huge, and I was sportscasting still, but I woke up with too much to do and went to sleep with too much to do. And I couldn't catch my breath. And I knew that I had found, as much as I always thought that sportscasting was my gift and my calling, I knew, you mentioned it, that feeling after you speak, that connection, that feeling that you couldn't put a price on, that, you know, you've affected another soul. And I was having that more and more, and I was having these relationships and building relationships with players. And here I look up 3 or 4 years later, I look up and I've been to 60 plus colleges. It's spread out to Customs and Border Patrol and law enforcement. And as I mentioned, halfway houses and churches and schools. And so in 2019, to put a bow on it, 2019, I lost my mom to breast cancer. And then I had 2 months later what I call a dark night of the soul, where I almost took my own life. And I apologize for not giving a trigger warning to your audience.
No, that's okay.
And after that, I wrestled with the devil on whether or not to talk about it. And God said to me, my girl, you are a warrior. I saved you for a purpose. Go tell it far and wide. And Moira, it blew the movement that was already crazy good and popular out of the water, because I began to talk about mental health before even the pandemic, we even knew what the pandemic was.
Wow.
And so I retired that fall, and I've never looked back, and it's been spectacular. Yeah.
And you are literally the hands and feet on this earth. Like, goodness gracious. I mean, there's so much there. There's so much to just say, like, you know, you were in the right place. God had led you to that position and that platform. And like you said, to find that next purpose. Yeah. And you were bold enough and courageous enough to keep taking the steps through all the doors that were opening. But that doesn't mean there weren't dark nights of the soul. And I call it the same thing, sister. It's like, it is the darkest night of the soul. And, you know, hopefully there won't be another one that's quite that dark, but there's different levels of those nights, and we all go through them. And it's not always this pathway to, you know, success and impact and all of that. But the biggest thing that I can impart is always, it's there. Like that voice, that calling, where you're supposed to go. I think we get so caught up in our heads and in other people's opinions and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. And, you know, what's the right this and what's the right that and what's the right way to post and and it's like, if you just turn inward, like the answer is in you.
Yes.
And so often it is our pain turned into purpose. Man.
And people ask me all the time, how do I find my calling? And I tell them, let's go back and let's identify, you know, what you've been through that was meant to kill you, but it didn't.
Right.
And then people say to me, well, I didn't have anything traumatic. I had a good upbringing. Well, first of all, if you had a good upbringing and saw good love, it is your moral responsibility to go teach good love to other people, because so many of us did not see great versions of love growing up.
Right.
And until we encounter somebody who shows us different, we
Yes.
will continue to repeat generational patterns over and over and over and over. And so I say to people, okay, get a notebook and put it next to your, your notes app or your phone when you're watching TV. Maybe you're scanning the news, you're reading something that bothers you. Maybe it's child trafficking. Maybe it is abuse. Maybe it is the homeless. Maybe it is old people. And I found this other day, it was so amazing. This company, this nonprofit in Texas, that'll pay for a senior to have a dog. They pay for the food. They pay for everything.
I love that.
So seniors aren't lonely and they can have a dog. And I'm like, if I can get more people thinking along those lines. And here's the other thing I talk about in the book is that so many of us serve, and I want you to serve, but I want you to find serving in your sweet spot.
Yes.
When you find your sweet spot, you won't burn out. I still have the same zest and the same desire and excitement 7 years later, going to speak at TCU football later this week. The same excitement that I had 7 years ago. When the excitement stops, I'll know it's time to identify and see if there's something different I need to be doing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you linked that up with like the pain piece, go where your pain is.
Yeah.
So, this is a heavy subject to like delve into, but I feel like I'm always like, we got to have these conversations. We have to have the difficult conversations. So I'm so curious because I've got a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, and they're right on the precipice of kind of this whole new world for them in high school and college. And I've just started literally this past week having conversations with my son about just the way of the world, unfortunately, like, the conversation where you could do nothing and be accused, but also obviously the conversation of like respect and all of this. Yes. And it's funny. You said you went in and talked to those players. We were on a baseball trip last week and I was pumping gas and I got in the car and I just looked at my son and I said, never, ever, ever hit on a girl at a gas station. It is so scary. And he was like, wow, what happened? And I'm like, but that's what we live with as women. I'm at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Don't hit on me or talk to me. And I said, you have to understand. And as a 15-year-old, I said, listen, even if you're just, kind of, not that I don't think my son would ever do this, but like the cat call where a teenage boy might think it's innocent. I was like, you have no idea the fear that you instantly instill in a woman. As a boy, as a man, you have to just know this, and you have to know, like you're talking about, if something's going down and, my son being the, quieter boy, I'm like, you're going to want to run away. You can't. I'm like, you can't, you have to lean into that in these really uncomfortable, hard situations. So I'm so curious what the conversation is that you're having and how you're kind of teaching and educating these college boys.
Yeah. College boys, high school boys. So I started with boys I call them kings. I believe inside of each one of us is a king, and a king is not perfect. It means you know better. So you do better. It means you serve, you lead, you give. It means you think of others first. A king, if he screws up, says it and owns it. And he apologizes to people and makes it right. He does an inventory check of his soul before he goes to sleep so that he can sleep well at night. If he needs to fix something, he fixes it. Same with a queen. So when I first started speaking to kings, after a while, I was like, oh gosh, I need to speak to queens too, because they're part of the equation. We're part of the equation. But oh my gracious, the conversation you're having with your son, I call what I do, Moira, soul training. It's so deep. It's about your soul. You're going to get training in every other place, but I do soul training. And what I talk about is, what did you see growing up? Again, back to that good love. If you saw good love and you got a friend over here and he's not treating his lady right and he's talking to her like crap, and you've got to be the one, and they may not like it in the moment. They may not think it's cool in the moment. They may ridicule you, but I'm telling you, I promise you, you're planting a seed. I had a king of mine from Texas A&M. He said, I went home And all of these guys were talking crap about this girl, and they were talking negative and calling her names. And he said, "Hey man, I don't want to talk about women like that. And I don't allow people in my presence to talk about women like that." And they kind of ribbed him a little bit. And later on, that guy texted him and he said, and the guy that I taught said, "This lady taught me this, I recently learned." And so the guy came back to him later on and he said, "Hey man, I never thought about it like that. Nobody's ever told me I shouldn't call women names."
Yeah.
And so if we got to teach better ways. And so it's crazy, but I'm teaching young men how to date and how to have respect and how to have chivalry. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they came from a culture where it was okay to have. I know young men that are in my life, their uncles and their dads encourage them to have multiple girlfriends and I'm like, no, let me tell you about the beauty of being with one woman, one person. And I teach them, hey, if you're, the difference of, are you ready? Are you not? Like I go into some programs. I just went to Missouri earlier this year and we did a full on hour and a half on dating, on women, and they were like this. I started and they were like, Miss Rachel. And so they're hungry again to learn how to relate. They come up to me and say, how do I let her know I love her? Or she's struggling here, or what's going on here. And I literally I can't tell you the thousands of texts over the years I've got, Miss Rachel, what do I do here? How do I handle this? And it's really, I said recently, and I'm still blown away that I was on the 700 Club, but I said recently in the 700 Club, they asked me, what does it feel like? And I said, only recently have I been able to really quantify what I do. And I would suspect that this is the way you feel about what you do. For me, it feels the closest thing to heaven, this side of, this earth side that I'll ever experience. Like the closest thing to what I imagine heaven feels like. When you see a soul turn on, when you see somebody get it, when you see somebody forgive their mama, or get into counseling, or not take their life, or any of those things. And I know you experience the same things as me. It is like, it's the soul lottery. It is what I imagine heaven is like, where my people are waiting. And that's the way I describe what I do. Yeah.
I love that. And I know everybody's had moments of that, right? So it could be completely unrelated to your profession.
Yeah.
But you kind of also just connected the dots to like, how do I find my purpose? How do I find my thing? And it's like, where are those moments, right? Where are those magical moments? And it's funny, I can remember in very early sobriety, so over 20 years ago, one of my really dear friends in recovery relapsed on heroin. And I will never forget showing up scared out of my mind, but like going in instead of retreating, right? Showing up at his house, sitting at the kitchen table, just trying to help.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be there. I don't know how to handle that situation. I don't have any expertise, but I will never forget the feeling when I left. I just remember feeling like there is no greater calling on my life than that moment. There is no place God needed me more than right there in that moment. And I'm not saying everything changed because I was there, but just that purpose that you are exactly where God needs you and wants you. And it's funny because I haven't thought about that in a million years, but that's kind of so much of the work that I'm now doing in the world that took me a long time to find my way back to, but there's no greater feeling. Oh, and you are doing darn good work in the world. I mean, it's amazing. And I think the other thing is to encourage, the audience to have more of those conversations, because even when, like the simple thing, like don't talk to girls at a gas station. And my son's like, huh, what? Like, why wouldn't I talk to a girl at a gas station? And I'm like, like they don't understand. And it's like, we assume so much of our children, even if we do have a solid home, and we have to be having all of the conversations.
And you're absolutely right. There's, I have conversations with players and athletes and non-athletes, just like you're having with your son. And there are broken women that are not walking in their queenship and their queendom, who are unhealed. and who are broken and will make false accusations. There are also women that obviously sexual assault is very hard to prove, and it happens every single day. And it's why we need other kings to stand up. And if you see something going down, stand up, do the right thing, save somebody, step in, don't let it happen. I remember being after a football game, being in an establishment in Tuscaloosa. This was a couple of years back, and I was trying to get a ride myself. And I saw this older gentleman try to take this inebriated woman out of this establishment. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Get out of here, go home. You're not. And then we got her a ride.
Yeah.
Whether you're a king or a queen, however you identify, I say king, queen, royal to be inclusive, but we're at a place in the world where we absolutely have to stand up, Moira.
Yes.
I do a lot of work at the border with Border Patrol agents, and the things that they're seeing coming across, and it's horrific. It's horrific. It's horrific. And what they're going through, and the numbers and the stress that they're under. So yeah, we're at a place in time where if you're listening to this podcast, say this is your calling. Like you can make a difference.
That's
big,
just
small, job, passion project, whatever it is you do, you can make a difference in this world.
You absolutely can. And the joy that comes from that is priceless. I watched The Sound of Freedom. Have you seen it yet?
I have not, but everybody's like, you got to get there.
You got to get there.
I know him, Tim Ballard, and he amazing.
Well, and you obviously, you also know the reality of what's going on without having seen the movie, which is not the case for most people.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a dear friend of mine who hadn't seen it the other day, and she was like, well, what is like, what can people do? Like, what is the call to action kind of? And I said, the interesting thing, the call to action at the end is to just go see the movie and get as many people as you can to see the movie. And, I went on and like bought tickets where people can grab tickets for free and that kind of a thing. But it really is, if we equip our nation and the world with better perception, better eyesight, a responsibility to, think about it. There's millions of people in the United States. If everyone was a little bit more bold in, oh, that doesn't look right, that doesn't feel right, because we feel it on an energetic level. And I actually had this experience the other night, and I'm kicking myself. And this is hard to admit on air, but we sat down at a bar because it was the only place there were no tables. And my husband was parking the car. And when he walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, the guy behind me is so wasted. Like he was so loud and obnoxious. And then they got up 5 minutes later, and the younger one said, are you okay to drive? And it was like, I was in that moment where I was like, what do I do? And I look back on that moment, and there were probably 20 other people around me thinking and feeling the exact same anxiety, but too passive, too scared to say anything, because also you don't know if, it's going to erupt or what's going to happen, but we have to take that action. We have to take that action.
And recently there was a case, and it ended up as a hoax, which really was even worse. But there was the case of Carly Russell in Birmingham. I used to live in Birmingham, Alabama girl. And she supposedly saw a toddler on the side of the road and was kidnapped. And so what immediately people started to say in those 3 days before she turned up, and again, praying for her, because obviously some sort of mental illness or sickness to perpetuate that kind of hoax. But what ended up happening, Moira, was people were like, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to help people. I'm not going to put I'm not going to, look what can happen if you do this. And that's the exact opposite of what we need in the world. If we all just stay in our own lanes, it is going to get progressively worse. Yeah. We need people to rise up and do the right thing, believe, speak, proclaim, all of the things, without getting too preachy. But we need people to stand up and be who they were created to be.
100%, 100%. And again, it's like the whisper, right? It's there. Long time ago. And this, I look back on this story, and I swear I'm going to have a conversation with Oprah one day, because I'm like, this story was something I never forgot. And it planted a seed for really the way I live in the world, but what I teach in the world. And she talked about a woman going into her building in like a city, And there was, a worker guy there, somebody working on something. And she gets in like she immediately walks in, and energy, right? Because there's that intuition we have, like,
Yep.
this isn't okay. But she doesn't want to say anything because she doesn't want to offend, right? This is what women go through. I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to, look like I'm better than or whatever. So she doesn't say anything. She gets in the elevator. He gets in the elevator. That intuition gets bigger. And she's like, this is not good, So she's like, do I press the button? Do I get off? Do I hit the alarm? But like, oh my gosh, let's not be dramatic.
Yeah.
Right. These are the stories, but it's there. And he ends up, beating, raping, the whole 9 yards. And it's like, this woman had the story of like, I knew the second I walked in and I didn't do anything about it. And multiple opportunities to do something. And, we don't want to call attention. We don't want to be dramatic. We don't want to be a little too much, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage everybody to listen to that immediately, because, it's so important. So important. So let's go back to you. What are you? So are you just speaking everywhere now? I want to hear more about the book too. It's available for purchase, right?
Yep. And I always have a little copy sitting next to me. It's like a pretty blue cover, I'm
so
smiling
gorgeous.
on it. Thank you. My middle name is Joy. And people ask me,
oh my gosh, I love that.
They're like, is that a stage name? I'm like, no, that's my real name. My uncle named me that at birth. And I was a surprise baby. I'm not ashamed of this fact anymore. I talk about it in the book. And the book, I'll say this really quickly, is I tell people, like, there's a lot of books on joy that are pretty and tidy. Mine is messy and hard and beautiful and deep and ugly at times. And there's still joy in that. I talk about my own addiction. I was addicted to hard drugs for 9 years in my 20s, Moira.
Wow.
And only by the grace of God am I alive and here to talk about it. And people ask me a lot. They're like, hey, the whole thing with the addiction and all of those things, and how much I love the Lord and how much I love God. And I said, if you've been where I've been and he saved your life, and you would love him the way that I love him, because he's the only reason I'm alive. But yeah, so I was born, my uncle named me that. I was a surprise child when I was younger. The enemy, the devil, whatever you want, your listeners want to call him, but for me, it's the devil. He imprinted words on me, Moira, like bastard and unlovable. And I never told anybody about those words that were imprinted on my little soul. And what happened was they blew open chunks so wide of my soul, it was like the size of Texas. And I began to try to fill those holes with things and substances and people. And it was never going to fill it. And that's what led to my addiction. And now I say, my mom, before she went to heaven, said, you were the reason I got saved, like you saved my life. And so no, I wasn't planned, but I was planned by God. And so traveling and speaking all over, getting ready to, and I've done this before, but getting ready to make it official, train other speakers. One of the greatest joys for me is teaching other people how to be speakers, how to create things.
Yeah.
I've been dubbed a movement coach. I help people create what's inside of them and bring it out of them. And I also teach and coach people on joy, how to have more joy in their life.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's just and I'm getting ready. You probably have felt this, like you put something out there and you're like, I want to do it again. I was crazy, but I want to do it again. I'm getting ready to write book number 2. Because it's percolating already.
Yes, it is. And the world needs it, sister. The world needs it. Oh my gosh. I am so grateful for this conversation and grateful to know you and this connection. I mean, going back to what you said in the beginning, right? Relationships and it's you will meet those people along the path when you take those steps, right? Like that's the thing. It's like we're kind of in this cage and we're not living in our purpose, and we're scared to take the step, and we're scared to do this, and we're scared to take the risk, right? Because there's often so much risk, and there are moments along my path where I have risked. Like I look back and I'm like, only God, because I can't believe I did that, but you get to these points, and And what is on the other side of that fear and what is on the other side of that risk is every single thing that you are just yearning for and searching for, the relationships, the financial freedom, even though you and I both agree, like that's not what it's about. That just comes with pursuing your calling.
Yes.
Oh, goodness gracious. This is so, so good. So let me ask you that. Somebody asked me this on a podcast interview not that long ago. And I was like, what a great question to end with. He asked me, he said, how would you define success? I think you've kind of covered it, but
success. Success is to me is briefly is a number of things. It's being able to lay my head on the pillow at night and know that I'm right with people. I've made things right. Doesn't mean everything's perfect. It means I'm not beefing with anybody. I've said what I needed to say. I've honored myself. I've honored God. I've apologized when I was wrong. I stepped into Moira being a bonus parent of 4 children. And I've been in their lives for 6 years, but right now we've been married a year and a half. They're 12, 14, 16, and 18. I had a dog before. Okay. Wow. So I fail. Every parent fails. Every human fails. But I fail a lot. And just by nature, I took care of myself for a long time. And so there's a lot of apology there. Hey, I didn't handle that right. Or, hey, I just want to tell you, I love you. And so for me, it's laying my head on the pillow at night, knowing I honored God, I honored my family and myself. And it's living, it's looking at each day. I found this recently and I'm going to be teaching on it soon. And it's this idea of looking at each day, almost as if my friend Svetlana says, it's almost as if like you're like an alien and everything's new. The trees are new.
Yeah.
The breath. I mean, everything's new, like everything. Butterflies are new. You look at things that you've seen before 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, and you're like, gosh, that is beautiful. Wow. That refrigerator is amazing. Wow, those sheets are really clean. Wow, that's running water. Like it just enhances a sense of gratitude. Absolutely. I do that. And then I look at the day and I go, this day will never come again. I'll never be who I am again. I'll never, have my first podcast with you. I'll never, get to meet you for the first, and so when you do that, and when I feel a rumbling in my spirit, when I feel ungrateful, when I feel anxious, when I feel and I've learned to not look at my emotions as necessarily negative. They're an emotion. If I can sit with it, then I can figure out underneath it what's causing the anger or the anxiety, and I can get curious about it. And if I don't act on it right away, that is so powerful, such a powerful learning tool. I can go, okay, why did I feel that way? Is that my own junk, or did somebody really mean it that way? And that's their own junk. So curiosity, gratefulness, and then clearing and wiping the slate at the end of the day to make God, my family, and myself proud.
So good. So good. So good. Oh my gosh. I love the alien thing. I love it. I love it. I mean, it really is I always say the main reason I like to travel is my appreciation for home. Even 2 nights ago, I just flew up to Baltimore and back in like 48 hours. I was gone for 1 night. Yeah. And Sunday night, I was like, why are these are the softest sheets. Like I just was like bubbling over with the heaven that was my bed.
With joy. Yes.
Up for a night. You would have thought I was on a mission trip for a month. But it gives you that perspective, and to like milk that when you're in it, right? It's so good. So good. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Rachel, I cannot tell you, first of all, how much I love you, adore you. I hope we stay super connected.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful for your story and your time today, but I am so much more grateful for you just being a warrior out there. Like you are doing the work that the world needs. And I am so incredibly grateful for that, honestly.
So thank you. And thank you for having us. I always say to people when I speak to them, or when somebody, you feel so strongly, like right now, that somebody gets you, I always say, thank you for having the heart to get it. Not everybody, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. Nobody is everybody's cup of tea, but I'm certainly not. Some people are naturally, oh, is she really like that? And the people closest to me are like, no, that's who she really is. She's just, this is who she is. And so I always just thank people genuinely when their soul, when you like attracts like, I teach on that. So when you see a like-minded person, you're like, and I teach, and you can tell your son this, and you can tell your kids this, You may be attracted to somebody that is, not a queen or a queen, right? Or maybe you're attracted to this woman who's such a great woman, and you're over here and you're doing your own thing, you're cheating, and you're, but you a like attracts like, and eventually, right? Like eventually there's going to be a severing of those things. And I say that to say that you gotta, if you want a good person, we're gonna go into a whole nother subject. I know we're
I love it. We can go.
You gotta be a good person. If you
Yes.
want a good person, would you want to date you? Would
Right.
you want to be your friend? Are you a good
Right.
friend? And so when you do meet the people that you vibe with instantly, you're like, yeah, okay, that's a real one. That's a real one.
That's
So
my
thank you.
people. That's my people. Absolutely. You are so my people. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, we are going to wrap there. I'm going to put everything in the show notes where people can find you, the link to your book, all of that. So I just want to encourage everybody to go there, like connect. You said so many things. I know I have so many people in this audience that want to be a speaker, want to figure out their brand, want to figure out how to get their message into the world, all of those things. And I mean, you're the girl. So make sure you go find all of that information, you guys. Rachel, thank you again. And thanks everybody. Make sure you share this episode. If you loved it, share it on social, tag us, share it with a friend, all of the above. And thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Thanks, guys.